Welcome back to AM Agenda. I'm Ashley Gillen. Well, the Treasury official Godwin Gretsch, at the centre of the Oz-Car affair, admits he faked the email. The Prime Minister and the Treasurer have now both been cleared of any wrongdoing, and the opposition leader, Malcolm Turnbull, admits that the evidence he used in his attack against the pair was based on false information. But this Oz-Car affair is far from over. This morning, the Prime Minister is demanding Malcolm Turnbull provide all correspondence he had with Godwin Gretsch, and he says Mr Turnbull should resign.
I believe what's been on display here is characteristics of impulsiveness.
We'll try and bring you what Mr Rudd had to say this morning when we can get that for you. But for now, joining me on our panel of politicians, the Labor Parliamentary Secretary, Jason Clare. Good morning.
Good morning, Ashley.
And the Liberal frontbencher, Scott Morrison. Good morning to you.
G'day, Ashley.
Scott Morrison, how do you think Malcolm Turnbull has come out of this? Yesterday we saw him give an exhaustive 45-minute press conference, but when he was asked what he regretted about this whole affair, he said, well, he regrets ever meeting Godwin Gretsch, but that seemed to be about it.
Well, I don't think that's exactly what happened. I mean, look, journalists may want to be looking for their Dr Phil moment over all of this, but the facts are these. We've had an Auditor-General's inquiry, we've had a federal police inquiry. All of these issues have now been gone over in fine detail, and the results has been outlined. And frankly, I think it's time to move on. I think the public have had a gutful of this whole issue, and for the Prime Minister now to be trying to continue to pursue this thing purely for purely political motives, I think, you know, makes it very hard, I think, for the Australian public to have any sort of serious support for a Prime Minister who just wants to, you know, drag this thing out for his own political motives. I mean, they want him running the country, not going and chasing after things that have clearly run their course. This matter has run its course. Godwin Gretsch faked the email. That is clear. Godwin Gretsch was the one who enthusiastically pursued the opposition over this matter and raised these things. We even had Michelle Grattan on ABC radio this morning say that if this information had been presented to her, she would have accepted it. So, look, I think the matter's come to a conclusion and it's time for everybody to move on.
But, Scott, in the interest of transparency, should Malcolm Turnbull release all correspondence he ever had with Godwin Gretsch?
Look, I think these sorts of calls from the government are really quite ridiculous. I mean, you've got to remember, this was a Prime Minister who in opposition accused half the front bench, in particular the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister, of financing terrorism. We then had a Royal Commission which exonerated all of those ministers, and there was never an apology and there was never any tabling of documents or anything of this from the then opposition and now the Prime Minister. So, look, I think it's time for the Prime Minister to move on. I certainly know that the Australian people want to move on. This has been a very sorry matter, and at the end of the day, a quite unbelievable matter. I mean, as Malcolm said, I mean, if this was fiction, it wouldn't be credible. And so it's time to move on.
Jason, Malcolm Turnbull admits that he was duped. How was he to have known that Godwin Gretsch was making all of this up? Wouldn't any opposition leader have jumped on what on the surface might have looked like pretty solid information?
Well, I don't think any opposition leader would, and some previous opposition leaders have made that point, that you do need to interrogate the evidence. Remember, Malcolm Turnbull used to be a barrister, and his job was to interrogate people, work out right from wrong, and work out fact from fiction. But he didn't do that. He jumped to conclusions, and as soon as the Senate inquiry evidence came about, he called a press conference and he called for the Prime Minister's head. And now we know why he was so quick to act, why he was so rash in his judgment, because he knew the answers to the questions that Godwin Gretsch was going to give in that inquiry before the questions were even asked. So what we now see, what's been revealed over the last 24 hours, is that there was a sham inquiry put together by Godwin Gretsch and Malcolm Turnbull and the Liberal Party, where questions were put together in advance and answers were put together in advance. We don't know whether there was coaching of witnesses, but there is a real risk that there's been a contempt of the Senate. Now, if this approach had been adopted in court, then there'd be a contempt of court. Malcolm Turnbull would be in a lot of trouble. That's why the government believes that there are more questions that need to be answered.
Scott Morrison, do you think there is a chance that Malcolm Turnbull and Eric Abetz have treated the Senate with contempt?
Well, what I find interesting is this, and if there is any senator, if there's particularly any government minister who's particularly while in opposition or even government, are going to tell me that they have never had a discussion with a department official prior to a Senate inquiry, particularly ministers talking to their departmental officials in advance of estimates hearings and things of this matter, then they should put their hand up. I think what we're seeing here is the government trying to pursue the politics of this matter, and I think what the government needs to do is get back to governing the country and move on. If the government is serious about bringing forward some reference for the Senate to consider in terms of a reference to privileges, then I'd be interested to see if they're going to actually talk to the opposition about that and see if they can put it in a way which would alleviate any concerns that the opposition might reasonably have that this is just another political opportunity for the government. But if they're not prepared to talk to the opposition about that and just ram it through as a stunt, well, I think the government's motives will be truly exposed.
But Scott, if it is found that Malcolm Turnbull or Eric Abetz did treat the Senate with contempt, are their careers on the line over this, do you think?
Well, I think that's quite elite, actually. I mean, at the moment we don't have a reference. There is no suggestion that any such case would be upheld. So I think, what we need to look at next is what is the government going to put up in terms of a reference? Are they going to talk to the opposition about that reference, or are they just going to try and use it as a political stunt? I suspect they're going to try to use it as a stunt because the Prime Minister wants to just drag this out for as long as he can to try and pursue the politics. He should run the country.
Jason, Clare, it does sound like the government's really looking for more political blood over this, wanting heads to roll.
Well, this is a case that shows that Malcolm Turnbull doesn't have the judgment or the character to be Prime Minister of Australia. 6 weeks ago, when Parliament sat, Malcolm Turnbull refused to say whether he'd even met with Godwin Gretsch, and yesterday it's been revealed that he had. He also refused when he was asked to say whether he'd even seen the email. Now it's been revealed that he had. And Godwin Gretsch has said that he was put under great pressure to reveal that information to Malcolm Turnbull. The question now is, what else don't we know? What else don't we know? And a Senate inquiry would show that. Now, if Malcolm Turnbull's got nothing to hide, then he will let this inquiry occur. But if he uses his numbers in the Senate to stop this inquiry once again, well, it will go to his culpability. If you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear.
Scott Morrison, how is the government planning to approach that? Will you let that go ahead using your numbers in the Senate? Well,
as I said before, we haven't seen what the reference terms are, and we would want to be assured that this is not just some political stunt from the government. And I think that is what we're going to see from the government, a political stunt to try and drag this issue out. And I don't think that's what the public wants to see. We've had a police investigation. We've had an Auditor General's inquiry. I mean, this thing has been drilled more than North Sea gas or oil. So, look, this matter, I think, has come to a conclusion, and it's time for everyone to move on.
Scott, it feels like we do talk about Malcolm Turnbull's leadership every week. The fact there seems to be this question mark over it and has been for so long isn't great for the party. Is it just that there's a lack of options and that's what is keeping Mr Turnbull in his position?
No. The reason Malcolm Turnbull is in the position of Leader of the Opposition is because he has the strength of leadership and he has the vision for the country that can take our country forward and take our party forward. That's why people put him into this position. He is a very authentic politician. He is someone who calls it as he sees it. He is not the sort of confected conscript of a Labor machine, which is what we see in the Prime Minister. Someone who has been exposed time and again for frankly being a bit of a phony when it comes to issues. This is a very authentic person. He's not what you'd call a typical politician. In many ways, he's very much an anti-politician. I think the public look for that sort of sincerity and authenticity in public life.
I just want to get your opinion on something we saw happen last night. The former Prime Minister, John Howard, has given a speech saying that he thinks that the media trivialised and basically misunderstood Pauline Hanson by focusing on what many saw as racist policies. Jason, Clare, what do you make of those comments?
I didn't see those comments, but in relation to Malcolm Turnbull, first can I say the Liberal Party got a problem here. Malcolm Turnbull's a little bit like airline food, not much good, but they've got no other choice, and that's why they'll have to stick with Malcolm Turnbull. If Peter Costello was still in the race, you can bet there'd be a leadership challenge right now, and I'd probably be winning the bet that I had with Scott a couple of weeks ago. In relation to Pauline Hanson, I think that any fair-minded person would say that John Howard should have acted quicker and not accept racist and xenophobic comments. We live in the country that we do now because of the failure of the former Prime Minister to stand up for things that are right and decent when he should have.
Scott Morrison, were you surprised to see those comments from the former PM last night?
I'd say this, just like Youthgate, I think the issues of One Nation are very much in our past, and I'm very thankful that they are. I think that chapter is closed, and I think most Australians would be very pleased about that.
Okay, Scott Morrison, Jason Clare, we've run out of time. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Ashley.
Thanks, Ashley.
And we'll be back with you this afternoon for PM Agenda at 4:15 Eastern for more fallout from this Oscar affair. Plus, of course, David Spears will be live again from Cairns, where the Pacific Islands Forum will be getting underway in the next hour or so. And we'll be bringing you live events from there as they happen throughout the day. For now, though, I'm Ashley Dillon. Thanks for your company.